Hi, my name is Greg Hake. You're listening to Awaken Nation today with Brad Zales.
A huge shift is taking place on planet Earth. People seem to be waking up. Tired of the way things used to be, they are creating something brand new and changing the world we live in. My name is Brad Zales, and I get to sit down with the next generation of idea makers, the disruptors, and the game changers. Everyday people, just like you and me, from all over, who are doing amazing things to Awakened Nation.
Greg, hey man, welcome to the show.
That's good to be here, Brad. Thank you.
You're welcome. I have to give a big shout out to our buddy Damon Lemby. He couldn't say enough about you, especially in the leadership and training and development arena. And folks, if you're listening today, buckle up. You're going to have a really great, interesting show today because my guest is Greg Hake. He is the founder of Fatal Flaw, a leadership consulting agency that works with organizations that are invested in team building, leadership, and need to equip their teams with mental resiliency skills. Greg, that is so needed today. I'm glad you're doing that kind of work. Greg is a Navy SEAL veteran with multiple combat deployments in support of the global war on terror. Leveraging over 20 years of military experience, Greg helps motivate professionals to pivot quickly in the face of change and embrace decentralized servant leadership. He specializes in leadership development, change management, and mental resiliency. Greg has an MBA from University of Southern California and is the father of four amazing children. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Thank you. Much
You're welcome.
appreciated, Brad. Appreciate the
Sure.
opportunity and love to talk. So,
That's a good thing. You completed two training tours as a Naval SEAL, SEAL qualification training, leading petty officer for close quarter combat, training portion of the pipeline, and one of the leading chief petty officers training the West Coast based SEAL teams in maritime assaults. So you're kind of like a badass, is what
um,
I'd like to say.
well, thank you. I mean, within the most of my adult life was spent with other SEALs, so it's just
Yeah.
kind of expected, you know, not to downplay the accomplishments of myself or other team guys out there. It's
Yeah.
that's just the environment I was literally raised in, so to speak, from an adult. And I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity and was able to be a part of that organization.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your service, and I mean that wholeheartedly. A lot of people just say it, but you are the defenders of this great republic, and I thank you for your service, man.
Oh, well, thank you. I feel like I'm the one that got the most out of that relationship. This SEAL teams is treated very well from a military perspective, and you're given a significant amount of opportunities once you make it
Yeah,
through the selection process. And
yeah,
it was a great ride.
good. Well, I wanted to kick this off with, and I'm sure this is going to be a great story, but what did your 20 years of military training and experience make you better as a leadership and talent development professional? Because you made that transition over the years, and working with Damon, I had to ask, because we're living in a day and age where resiliency seems to be lacking, and somebody with a Naval SEALs background, tell us how you made that transition.
The transition, there was some mental gymnastics, if you will, getting into the private sector, but that was more from the side of leaving the teams. It's just such an amazing organization. And I was, I wanted to do it since I was very young. And then when it came time where this isn't really serving my family and where I want to go in life anymore, it's time to hang up the spurs. That was a challenge. Transitioning skill sets into the civilian sector or to the
Mhm.
into the private sector, if you will, that was relatively easy. One thing that the military, in a broad perspective, does very well, in my opinion, is develop leaders. Like whether you're in the Army, the Marines, Air Force, what have you, any of the services, I think that is done very, very well across the military. And of course, in special operations, they take it to the next level. So to answer your question, what sort of skills did I learn that transfer really well? I think that military individuals, as in particular special operations veterans and SEALs, I'm advocating for my own community, of course, they just were very, very decisive, are
Mhm.
able to pivot in the face of change at a rate that most organizations are not comfortable with.
Right.
And then just generally leading and managing complex scenarios with little to no technical knowledge, if you will, but able to sift through the information, asking measured questions and figuring out the direction that you should go. How should you prioritize? How should the team prioritize certain decisions and moving forward?
I've seen this arc in the change of the workforce through the years. I'm a baby
Yeah,
boomer, so I've seen this huge shift from obedience, command and control, to more of a style. We're talking about holacracy and no management zones, and people get to do whatever they want. But I don't think that works. I think you really need to define the mission, and what everybody knows they're contributing to the group. Do you find that's missing today? Especially when you go into train at places where maybe there's a younger workforce.
absolutely. I would say that another thing that the military does exceptionally well is defining an end state that they are shooting for, at least from a mission capacity
Right.
within conflict regions or what have you, is that what are we trying to do? And then getting the entire team unified along those lines and saying, this is the direction that we're heading. Here are your boundaries to operate within. And then moving within that space, I would say that SEALs, as well as other special operations veterans and military in general, within those boundaries and limitations, are just incredibly creative and come up with some very, very unique solutions and say, oh, I see how this over here can apply to mission success. And being very, very creative in that realm and just working autonomously, yet still with purpose. Does that answer your question, Brad?
Absolutely. Do you have any favorite wins you have with your clients, where they kind of we're going down the road loosey goosey? We're just running a company here, but then you define mission, you define what everybody's going to do on the team, and you get results. I'm always curious about that. How did that work out?
Yeah, absolutely. One specifically, I would say, is that I actually worked at a pharmaceutical startup. They were a client and then asked me to come on full time. And I filled a director of operations role with them for almost 3 years until a portion of that company was acquired by Pfizer. So shout out to Biohaven Pharmaceuticals and Vlad Schwartz and crew. They're just such a great group of people and very, 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 very relatable from a special operations perspective, fast moving, quick decision making. And I was given the responsibility of helping gain access to military, like military bases and the military portfolio, if you will, to provide care for our service members. And
Oh,
Vlad is really, really driven to support veterans, and the drug that the company owned at the time could really, really help. And he said, I want you to head up this effort to gain access and placement so we can provide our veterans with the best support. And we at the time, prior to the sale, we had 85% market share within the veteran space, and we had two other competing drugs. And it was against really, really large companies like AbbVie, which was a competitor, and they're multi-billion-dollar. And here's this little startup company. So I'm super proud of that. And the team that surrounded me had it was kind of a group of misfits, really, of people that understood the insurance space, literally a race car team, and some other nonprofits, as well as a guerrilla marketing team through Graham Goodrich, another great individual. And we just charged forward and did some really, really great things in that space and provided a lot of support to veterans, which is a near and dear to my heart. And active duty members as well. Sorry, primarily active duty.
I love this story, especially when you said you're a team of misfits. I'm thinking you're either the A team or Guardians of the Galaxy.
I
Uh,
was kind of Guardians of the Galaxy, I
yeah,
think.
there you go.
A lot of people in a startup. It was very fluid. It was okay, how do we do this? Let's
So you,
just charge forward and hit as many people as possible. And it was really cool. And it was just a completely unscripted environment. There was
yeah,
building the program from scratch. It was no, and there wasn't a lot of restrictions that comes with large organizations where there's administrative checks and balances, and you have to
yeah,
approve your efforts through a rigid chain of command that goes up and down. It was here, you're in charge. It was much like special operations.
yeah,
Here's the area that we want you to focus on. Here's what we would like to see achieved. Go do great things. And
yeah.
we did some pretty great things. And along the way, was able to support people with multiple B2B collaborations and nonprofits and all sorts of stuff.
It's funny. I actually love if the startup is well funded, I prefer working with them because I have that
They're great.
entrepreneurial background, because I built many, many companies, and I specialize in the generational portion of this management, conundrum we're facing today. I want to talk about resilience. And resilience is such a hot topic today because, and I don't mean to pick on the next generations, but there seems to be a huge divide. I interviewed someone yesterday as a millennial, and he's crushing it in business, and he was offered a franchise at like 17. And then there's the other side of the generations, and that is they don't have ambition. And I don't mean to stereotype that, but resiliency is a huge issue amongst the next generation. How do you handle, when something goes wrong, especially something devastating? What do you, I guess the best way I can ask this is how do you teach resiliency?
It's challenging to teach without a scenario to deal with, right?
Right.
Something that I encourage is communication, is that oftentimes when there's conflict, you'll see miscommunication, a, a lack of communication, or a complete ceasing of communication. And what I encourage my clients to do is you want to lean in, you want to keep communication because you can help guide the narrative within that space. And also something that I stress is on the other side of a resolved conflict is growth and understanding. And
Mhm.
the younger generation, they do want to learn.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a I think that there's a disconnect between your and mine generation and the younger generation, if you will. I think that there's a little bit of a pretentious attitude on our part of, screw these millennials or whatever we want to call, whatever label we want to call them. They don't listen, etc. And if you're primed within that mindset, with your interactions, it's going to guide the result, or it's
Yeah.
predictable result. So it's my experience that the younger generation wants mentorship and
Yes.
engagement. They may or may not be communicating that in a way that we're comprehending it. And there's a lot to be said with communication styles, is that think about when we grew up. I'm a child of the 80s. I was born in the 70s, and we didn't have these things. I mean, you
I
can
know.
literally go to the moon. We went to the moon on a computer that had 12 meg of RAM. And I don't even know how much this thing has, this smartphone from a RAM perspective, but I'm pretty sure it's a couple gigs. So it's like technically this could navigate us to the moon
Yes.
successfully, right? And so they're plugged into this. They're used to disassociated communication and removed from the human element. And this is
Yeah.
one of the things that I tell clients and potential clients is, as we divest from a physical workforce with people and we're leaning into automation, and we are leaning into a more disassociated engagement, like you and I right here. This is relatively safe. It is
Yeah.
from a millennial or a younger generation perspective. They probably wouldn't even have video on, right? But it
Right.
is important to keep these soft skills and communicate effectively and really, really lean into those things. It's because you're going to have people that two or three people for a region or locale that have AI that they're monitoring. They have automated manufacturing. They may have automated forklifts, or I mean, we're trending towards self-driving cars, etc. And if you and I, or me and the distant person, or whatever scenario, if we're not able to communicate within that human space, that becomes a single point of failure. And so these soft skills that people are kind of moving away from, or have been moving away from since COVID, I would contend that they're even more critical. Does that answer your question? I think I may have deviated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. I hated to point out, the stereotypes of the millennials and the Gen Z, but I always encourage people to get rid of those stereotypes because especially
Absolutely.
especially if you have children, you're going to notice that your kids, and you have four children,
Yes.
they are doing things we could never have imagined. They're doing amazing creative work. Um, you know, and I tell people all the time, since 1984, they've been working on video games, and that changes the brain. That changes the way you actually work and you see work. So I recommend to any organization a type of reverse mentorship where the senior executives or people managers take someone out for coffee who's younger and pick their brain and listen. Don't say, "Well, in my day, I invented Teflon and you should listen to me." It has to be a two-way conversation today because they're working with software sometimes and they're encouraged through habits to seek out new software to get their job done quicker. And I always say you got to watch out because there's software out there that can run on your iPhone that can eliminate your entire business sector and you don't know it. So you have to listen to younger people on the front lines. Am I correct in that assessment?
I think so. And I'm not trying to claim that I'm without my own bias and I don't have
Right.
my games where I'm like, what are you talking about, kid? Like, I'm not going to listen to you today. Like, I have my bad days just like I have my good days. Today's a good
Right.
day and I'm full of knowledge and wisdom, right? But there's definitely those in the moment that's challenging to execute on. And that's the leadership struggle, right? Is we have all these great courses. We have Jocko, he's an amazing individual who has done a lot for SEALs as well as the special operations community, going out and showing people that veterans can immediately deliver positive results. And you've got Simon Sinek, who is equally great within the leadership space. He actually spent a lot of time studying the military, particularly the SEALs, for best practices. And so you've got all these courses and knowledge and books, and then there's the in the moment interactions. And depending on what your capacity is on a daily basis, can determine the outcome of that interaction. And as a leader, it's important to, if you do have a negative interaction, to go back, maybe reflect on it and say, how could I have done this better? And that's another thing, segueing into the private sector, is that the military does exceptionally well is the debrief.
Oh,
And literally after every training evolution or mission, military units, and I can only speak from my experience within the SEALs, but in the SEAL teams, you go out and do a training, you do a training evolution or mission. The guidelines for the evolution are laid out beforehand. You know what you need to do. You go execute it, and then you come back as a unit, and it's what did we do well? What did we not do well? How can we improve? What can we make better? And people
yeah.
are very, very transparent because the stakes are so high.
Yeah. I did a TED talk where I pointed out the nine ways in which you learn in a video game. And those nine levels, the first four are equivalent to commandos in the field. When you're deployed, you don't have a chain of command, you have your circle, that's going on.
Interesting.
So, so one of the first things that I talk about is you learn by making mistakes in the field. That was number one.
Absolutely.
So every person in this generation has learned, you know, as a baby boomer, I was taught don't screw up, your career's over. And now you have a generation that says screwing up is how I learn. This is how I learn boundaries. This is how I learn to, you know, ask for forgiveness later after I do something. The second thing is it's all peer to peer. You only use the strengths of each of your team members within the organization when you need them. So I'm going to ask you this question. What do you see with organizations that they don't quite get the team right? You know, there's a way to manage teams, there's a way to manage the dysfunction of a team. What have you noticed that was really problematic with this whole team driven idea?
Uh, I think from an originating perspective, where I see companies struggle is the building of the team.
Oh,
Is that a lot of people are looking at a resume and they're using previous experience and skills as the driver for acquisition of that individual. And if you're applying for a position, presumably you have the skills to do it. And I think a lot of companies forget that more often than not, you're going to be onboarding that individual and you're going to be teaching them, or they're learning, a combination of both, what exactly the role requires. And so that's going to happen. But the thing that I see with clients and potential clients is they're not selecting for core values or a cultural fit, a personality fit. Um, there there's some different viewpoints on that. I'm of the frame of mind you want someone that not only has the skills, but also will be a fit within the organization. I had one
right.
particular client that they had hired 3 people before I was brought on board, and they had some significant struggles with those individuals. And it's not because they were bad people. It's just that they expected a particular way for that person to conduct themselves on a daily basis. And it's not that they were out of bounds or immoral or unethical. It was that they just didn't fit within the culture of that organization.
Yeah. I point this out sometimes to people. It's like, in certain business sectors, you yell at your employees, like trucking companies, that's considered standard and normal. And they're not mean. They're just like, hey, this was late. You scream at the guy. But in other organizations, it might be more of they work super late. They prefer to come in late and work late, like software development. So you really do have to find people that fit into an organization properly. And I don't know if you saw the study that the Harvard Business Review did on Netflix. And this is an old data, but um, it was a fascinating read into what Netflix decided to do. They decided to stop being mediocre and hiring B and C players, like 4 or 5 of them, and just saying, look, we're going to hire A players only, because A players, I can get the work of 4 people in one A player. And that means a go-getter, somebody who attacks their work, a self-starter. And what caught the attention of everybody else is they said, if you want to take a year off, go ahead. Well, A players don't take years off. They're obsessed with working. They're kind of obsessed with making themselves look good and supporting the team. So you've hired an individual that is a go-getter. I hate to put it into that term, but I find this very powerful. If how do you hire better? Let's just lay it out on the line, Greg. How do you hire better in an organization?
I mean, how do you hire better in an organization? I would contend that going back to what we previously talked about, it really, really starts at obviously what you're looking for
Right.
and the hiring process, and not looking for the quick fit, and not just looking at the skills, but really, really thinking about, as an organization, what do we represent? What are our core values that are important to us? And how are those different from other companies? And then within the interview process, this is what I've recommended to clients, is not just having one person interview them, but potentially having a panel or a series. So it's very in depth and thorough, because what you don't want to do is hire someone, they're a bad fit. Several months later,
Yeah.
they leave. The situation is where the position is gapped. And then you're going back out and doing it all over again. That costs organizations money and time
Yeah.
and productivity as well, which is, of course, another correlate to ROI. But I've created some cultural questions based off of for different clients and said, hey, these are your core values that we have identified as a group if they aren't already identified. And then there's your standard mission and vision, which on a those only go so far if they're integrated into the daily life of the organization. But if you just do that stuff and throw it up on the wall as a poster and it's rah rah rah, then don't do it. It's just a waste of your time. And
It
I've
is.
seen organizations that do that, but like a prime example of of the right way to do things was the organization Biohaven. Originally I was brought onto that organization as a consultant. We I came on when there were 62 people at that organization as a consultant. And then we
Hmm.
grew from 62, like the whole team. It wasn't just me, right? I'm not gonna like, oh yeah, it was all me. Good job, buddy. That was decidedly not the case. It was just some amazing
Yeah.
individuals at the organization. So we went as an organization from 62 people to 1,200 in about 8 months. And
Wow.
then took
That's wow. That's hyper
uh,
growth.
that's massive amounts of growth across all
Woo.
sorts of sectors, completely creating new divisions of the organization, went global, and then went from a small pharmaceutical company to being acquired by Pfizer for a
Yeah.
little over $12 billion, in 2 years. And
Wow.
so, like, obviously a success story there. But excuse me, I digress. To get back to your question, um, they hired people based on cultural fit. It was, hey, this person's going to be a good fit here at Biohaven. And there was a solid mantra that was used every single day, which was be bold, be brave, be brilliant, be Biohaven. And people talked about it all the time to justify actions. Hey, I was being bold and brave here, and this is just the Biohaven way. And that's great from an organizational perspective. And that's in the SEAL teams too.
Yeah.
The culture of the teams is integrated into the daily life. And there's some mantras that are, hey, this is kind of our cultural document. This is who we are. And it's a little weighty. It's really, really thought out. And the senior leadership of the SEAL teams at the time when the war on terror kicked off actually had the foresight to go out and do some deep dives to structure
Right.
things out. So we held the community together. But it looks like you've got a question there, Brad. I'll stop running my mouth.
No, I love it. I love what you're telling me because uh, you really do have to have people who fit into the organization. For myself, at K2, when I had founded K2, I did all the hiring for, the first 5 or 10 employees. And then after that, I asked the team to hire their employees. And so they got grilled, 2, 3 interviews with panels of people who they were going to be working with. And I've encouraged this in every organization. I found this out in the oil and gas industry. When they found somebody who could work a big rig, let's say, they'd ask them if they had friends or people that also could contribute. And they put these frontline workers into the process of hiring. Because what do we do subconsciously, Greg? We, if we're a self starter, that's what we look for subconsciously in the people we hang out with, the friends we like to work with, are the people we just, spend our time with. So I think organizations have to stop with just the siloed HR department and start bringing people in who are really the go-getters in an organization, the ones who are the shining stars. You can see them from across the room. They are a team player, but they're a great leader. They have to be brought into the hiring process along with the people that they're going to be interacting with on a day-to-day basis. Because
Totally agree.
I think that's the most powerful thing an organization can do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think Go back to that Harvard Business Review expose um, on Netflix. Here was the most powerful thing I thought, and it sounds really hokey and kumbaya-ish, but what they did is they took all their people managers, the team leaders who had goals they wanted to accomplish that year. And they sat them down and they went on a big retreat. I forget where they went, but it was a major, it was like Patagonia kind of level. And they told them to meditate on their goals for the year. What did they want to achieve, whether it was software development, website marketing, whatever. And the team leaders would close their eyes and meditate and look into the future and then come backwards and see who they needed to hire for that goal to be accomplished. And sometimes that person would only be there for a year and move on to another team. Instead of hiring, well, I need an accountant or I need a marketing pro, they were very aligned with the goals that the team, needed to accomplish that year. And that's how they hired. And I think it's almost like, being a SEAL team member. Who do you need to fill this role? And how do you hire like that? I mean, what do you look for?
I mean, within the teams, obviously you have an established network.
You're right.
But to understand your question, it sounds like you're asking, how do you plug in people to an established team that is operating at a high level? Would you say that's
Yes, that's a better way of asking what I attempted to ask.
no,
Yes.
it's quite all right.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear and understand what you're looking for. Um, there's a lot of personality fit there, and then there's the relevant skill and competencies. And
Right.
what you really got to be careful of is within someone's network to make sure that there's not that friendship bias, right? Oh,
Right.
I like this person, we get along, etc. They're going to be a good fit, and I'll get to hang out with someone that is, you know, a friend of mine or a colleague that I get along with. That can be slippery because
Yeah.
then you get into a realm of group think, and you're if the people that surround you don't have enough disparity of opinion, you can all just be regurgitating the same words and then
Yeah.
going in the same direction, which is great. You want to be headed in the same direction as a team. And you want just enough friction that provides positive conflict, if you will, where there's, hey, I don't like this. I don't like this. There needs to be some diversity of perspective. We're really,
Yeah.
really hung up as a society on diversity of on a racial level, on a demographic level.
Right.
Uh, what I would say the SEAL teams have a really, really great grasp on, and other elite organization, is diversity of experience. And that's where the real money lies. And so you've got to be
Yeah.
careful of that and focused on that and think about, hey,
I
is this
agree.
person going to be a good fit? And when I was doing hiring for Biohaven as an organization, that was something that I had to be very, very particular of because it was a scientific organization. I was in charge, one of the programs I was in charge of was the internship program. And I'm an extrovert and I have a natural bias towards extroverts. I'm like, this person's great. And before I had interviews like this, it was okay, really, really take notes and think about the person holistically. Maybe they don't talk. And I think that the interview from an extroverted perspective is a failure, but look at what they want to do, look at what
Yeah.
they're trying to achieve. And because there's a lot of people within the STEM field that are introverts. So that was something that I
Yeah.
paid attention to. Does that answer your question, Brad?
Absolutely. That absolutely does.
Okay.
We, the thing about Awakened Nation is we have a conversation and people can pick up, from our back and forth dialogue. And I'm glad you said what you said because I'm a natural extrovert. It's no problem for me to walk up to a president of any country and say, "Hey, it's a pleasure to meet you." And I'm not shaking in my shoes. Some people, and I've coached people for the TEDx stage who are extreme introverts. And I have to constantly be aware of that My fiance, she's a classic introvert, and I work with that. I really try to be more gentle and understanding. And I think that is the new perspective that the generations bring that my generation did not have. You either stood up and had ambition, or you were that guy in the corner. That's Ned. He's always sitting there quiet, never never does anything. And you think that guy is not the producer, and that guy's getting more work done than everybody else. So I'm glad you talked about that. There is one subject I really do want to talk about. When you sit with business leaders, and being a naval SEAL, this. Um, how do you help them through fear? Because even if it's a good thing like hyper growth, that can make you go, whoa, 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 I can't handle this. This is bigger than I thought. How do you help them through fear?
Admittedly, that's not a topic that I often cover. And I think that because that requires a degree of vulnerability, and people are very reticent to engage at that level. I think that that comes out in various forms, and it comes out in the space of decision making often. And with the cliche term, if you will, of change management, that's out there all the time. Oh, what do you do for change management? It's just really it's being decisive. It's,
Yeah.
hey, the world's a constantly evolving monster, and how do you pivot in the face of change? And I would contend that you'll see that fear that you're talking about, and it won't be stated with, hey, I'm afraid too. It will be demonstrated in action, or more accurately in inaction. And I would dive into that scenario in several ways, which would be, hey, what is our, just reiterating the end state that the organization is shooting for in that particular area or strategically. So anchoring into that, is that still our guiding light? Or based on this new information, do we need to pivot? If we do need to
Right.
pivot, where do you think we need to go? And just trying to initiate the conversation through that. It would be some dialogue behind it. It wouldn't be just a quick 90-second, oh yeah, hey. Now within the SEAL teams, that stuff does happen very, very quickly. It's a different environment within the combat space. Even in the training space, things happen very, very fast. The stakes are high. But one thing that unites people across the team in those environments is that down to the lowest level, they understand their role and they understand the end state that they're shooting for. Now, there might be some mentorship behind the prioritization of decisions, and the team leader or assistant team leader may come in and say, hey, that's great that you have this awareness. This may or may not be the appropriate time to address that, because we have to focus on this first. So there's a prioritization element within that space. Does that answer your question, Brad? I didn't want to
Yes,
go too long.
it does. I'm excited by the work you do because we need more people like you who have that experience of pressure. There's so many people out there in the space of learning and development, in entrepreneurship, and in leadership roles, teaching some things, and they don't have the experience you have. You literally have the structural experience of getting things accomplished. And so that experience, I think, is so much better than someone who gets up one day and says, I'm going to be a consultant. It doesn't quite work that way. You know how to put your money where your mouth is when it comes
Yeah.
to deployment, understanding fear, hyper growth, dealing with, stress management. Can the team handle this kind of growth? I mean, you get it. So I
Yeah.
take my
I
hat
mean,
off to you, man.
let's not give the teams too much kudos here, or myself. I was still part of a government agency. And as you know, that there's a challenge behind making decisions at times. So
Yeah.
whilst the teams is a great organization, there is still like, oh gosh, can't we just move forward on these things? There is pain points, right?
Yeah.
Nothing's perfect. And I don't want to create this gumdrop mountains and marshmallow clouds scenario where that organization, or myself included, go out and do things right all the time. I definitely have had my moments throughout my career. So has that organization. So does the military as a whole. So
A little bit of foobar once in a while, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not it is as they say, making sausage. Like hot dogs are great, they taste delicious, and I don't want to see the process behind it.
Growing up in Pennsylvania, we had something called Scrapple, and people go,
Oh
"Well,
yeah,
what?
I've heard that.
Yeah, what's Scrapple?" I said, "Well, hot dogs. Uh, that's Scrapple's made of the stuff they won't allow in hot dogs,
Yeah.
and
And it's delicious, right?
it's
And I
delicious,
don't
right?
want to see it.
Yeah, you don't want to know where it comes from." But it's been an honor to have you on the show today. How do we get a hold of you? Fatal Flaw? Did we go to your website? Where do we
Yeah,
go?
go to the website. It's fatalflawnation.com. I'm on LinkedIn and you can message me on that platform as well.
Yeah.
So that would be the best way.
Uh, Sometimes you have a beard, sometimes you don't. So people
Yeah,
have
I'm
to.
the headshot currently on the LinkedIn profile is a beard. And I shift back and forth between
Yeah.
hairstyles and facial styles so much just because I'm a little ADD and I like change. And so I started to try and keep up with that on LinkedIn and I just said forget it. So
My dad used to go with a goatee and mustache, and then he'd come down every once in a while, clean shaven or just a mustache. We're like, "What happened?" He's like, he wasn't paying attention, and he went past the zone where
uh
it looked okay, so he just shaved the whole thing off. We're like laughing. But yeah, uh, folks, reach out to Greg. He is fantastic. If you want your organization to grow, he talks about the future of work and what that is, and also can help your organization just be better with their leadership and managing people and hiring better. So, and a big shout out to Damon Lemby for introducing us. I'm honored, man,
yeah,
that you're on the
absolutely.
show today. So we're going to do the lightning round if you're ready. Are you
Yeah,
ready?
let's do it. It's best to just fire from the hip. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely. Question number one is, out of everything you do, what is it that you really are passionate and love to do?
I love engaging with organizations from a fractional perspective. And that allows me to dig in a little bit more and leverage positive impacts in a greater, longer standing capacity. Simon Sinek talks about how, and we touched on it briefly, so I was kind of regurgitating his own stuff, but repurposing it with my own perspective, if you will, which is you've got all these leadership development keynotes and offsites and all that stuff. And then people get back to their organization through the daily routine and they fail within that space. And I think that's twofold is that the grind is challenging and it takes a lot of discipline. And presumably, there's probably not a lot of mentorship within that space. So having that regular touch point with an organization, whatever it may be within the mentorship space, leadership development, organizational overhaul, and having a regular touch point every week where I can come in, speak with key individuals, talk through challenges. That's what I love the most because as I see it, that's where the greatest positive and lasting impacts are made.
I agree. That's very powerful. My second question is, what's your favorite memory?
Ooh. I mean, there's the kids one, and like that's like a softball.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's fine. It doesn't have to be business. It can be just, you stood on a mountaintop one day and, you saw a sunrise. Doesn't matter.
I've had some I've had some pretty memorable ones from a romantic perspective that were
Mhm.
impressive that I will keep to myself. Um,
You are a
I'd say
gentleman.
one of the most powerful experiences I had, and this is kind of a charged subject right now. Well, not charged, but I would say it's contentious, was I participated in a PTSD retreat that was centered around plant medicine.
Yeah.
And that that's one of the first things that came to mind. And I think eventually, as a nation, we're going to wrap our heads around that that's actually good for people, and
It
we're going to
is.
develop a process for it. And I'm an advocate for that endeavor. And there's a Treat California, shout out to Treat California, that is trying to get that stuff on the ballot for this election cycle of
Yeah.
getting psychedelics and plant medicine deschedulized, I guess,
Yeah.
because it really is helping a lot of veterans. But when I think about your question, that was one of the things that popped up into my mind.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. I have never done this
Absolutely.
before, but yes, I've also done the plant medicines. And
The
Stanford did a
life-changing
st
experience for me in a very positive way.
Yeah. Well, rewires the brain. Uh,
Yeah,
and I felt incredibly fortunate. The circle that I did in the deep desert of California, my ayahuasca ceremony was with veterans, and they wanted to purge the violence that was in their auric field. They wanted to calm down. The nervous system is hopped up. And for those of you who don't know about these plant medicines, they've been used for thousands, if not
yeah,
millenniums of years. And what they did is when a tribe went to war and they came back, the reason you didn't hear about PTSD from eons ago is because they forced them to do a 30-day fast and drink some sort of purging type of elixir. And ayahuasca is just one of probably thousands of these types of medicines that were used so they could come back to the tribe and not be angry and violent and ready to kill somebody just because you had a little bit of an argument because you're hopped up when you come back from war. And so these healing modalities, Stanford University has been doing studies. All the colleges have been doing studies on this, and hopefully we'll get it off of the opioid, list of this is bad, and start seeing it as a healing modality that it is. Your experience is a very good example of how it can help soldiers coming back from battle.
absolutely. Yeah, and that Andrew Huberman's doing a lot of information and studies on that. There's a lot of people that are digging into it and the data, and I don't have the data, but what I've heard is just pretty amazing from a positive
Yeah.
results.
Yeah.
It's trending in that direction.
Well, I learned about it from a friend of mine who had served in the military and was over in Afghanistan. Mike, my buddy Mike Purvis, and he began studying shamanism because he was suffering from extreme PTSD, and he realized the VA wasn't really helping. They were just giving him stuff to deal with it,
Yeah,
and he decided to check into plant medicine, cannabis, tobacco, peyote, and ayahuasca. And the guy is living he's clear. He does once in a while, have some moments, but he has a successful company. He's running all kinds of things for gaming industry. He has a wife and children he's raising. The guy has really turned his life around, and it's all because of plant
nice.
medicine that's been around for years. Tribal medicine, yeah,
Hundreds of years, if not
yeah,
thousands. So
oh yeah. I recommend it. I've done it, and I recommend it. My third and final question. We got off on a tangent here, but my third and final question is: when you look at your children, what is your greatest hope?
oh, that they have a better life than I have.
Hmm.
I want so much for them. Um, and not that I had a bad life by any stretch of the imagination. It's been pretty amazing. It's not without challenges, and I want to love and support them as best I can. And I fail all the time, of
Yeah,
course, as a parent, and I'm still trying to figure it out. And something that I've realized is dealing with my own parents is that people are just like big kids. People are still struggling and figuring out, especially when you get into a position where I am now parenting my parents, and they're in their 70s. And
yeah,
not that I have all the answers by any stretch of the imagination, but it's that I've come to that realization recently. It's like, man, you're still just a kid. You're just in this adult body. And
it's
I'm
true.
just trying to love and support my family as much as possible within that space in both directions, both my children and as well as my parents. So
God bless you, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, Greg Hake here on Awakened Nation. Please reach out to him. Go to fatalflawnation.com. He's got some great stuff out there. Friend him on LinkedIn, please. And a big shout out once again to Damon Lemby for introducing us, man. Thank you for being on Awakened Nation.
Thanks, Brad. Really appreciate it. This was great.
You bet, buddy. Hey, everybody. As you know, next week we're going to have another extraordinary guest. Don't forget to tune in. And until then, bye-bye for now. Thank you so much for being a big part of the Awakened Nation movement. This is how you can help me and our extraordinary guests. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share this episode out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And let's grow this movement by word of mouth. Our success is because of you. Thank you, and see you next week.